The insurance adjuster called at 8:17 on a Tuesday morning and asked me to confirm the date of a fire that had never happened. I was behind the Marina office counter with coffee in one hand and storage contracts in the other. "Doc C," she said. "Electrical cabinet failure. Reported 3 weeks ago. No injuries. There had been no fire on Doc C, no smoke, no alarm, not even a tripped breaker." "Who filed the claim?" A pause. "It was submitted through your policy account, Ms. Hayes. It includes your electronic signature. My name is Marlene Hayes. I am 64 and before I owned a Marina, I spent 28 years investigating fires for Milwaukee. I know damaged wiring. I know staged damage too. When somebody uses your name, the first mistake is confronting them before you know why." I asked her to email the file, thanked her, and locked the office door. The photographs showed a blackened junction box, scorched cable, and warped conduit. The report blamed deferred maintenance. My signature sat at the bottom, cleaner than the one I gave the bank. The inspection form bothered me more. Its serial number came from a municipal system retired years before I left. Whoever invented this fire had dressed it in official paperwork. I opened an archived department tablet. The seal was close, but its outer ring was too thick and the eagle came from an outdated template. Fire usually tells the truth. People rearrange what remains. 7 months earlier, I had torn my right shoulder lifting a frozen dock ladder. After surgery, I could not drive or manage payroll. My son, Eric, stepped in. He was 38 and eager to prove I underestimated him. I gave him limited authority for payroll, routine vendors, and insurance communication. Temporary authority. I had never formally taken it back. Before sunrise the next morning, I drove to the Marina alone. Thin ice edged the harbor. The cabinet from the claim photographs was gone. A newer gray unit stood in its place, with fresh bolts, clean sealant. And no weather fading. Our real cabinets carried years of salt and chipped paint. This one looked installed for a brochure. I photographed every panel, lock, cable entry, plate, and maintenance tag on Dock C. Near the repair shed, I found an empty steel burn barrel. At the bottom were melted plastic and curled adhesive labels. One fragment still showed part of a manufacturer's code. It matched the wiring in the insurance photographs. By 6:30, I had documented 52 details. At 7:10, Eric's truck came through the gate. "You're here early," he said. "So are you." He placed one sandwich on my desk. He looked tired, with gray shadows under his eyes and white drywall dust on one sleeve. I turned the monitor toward him. The insurance company called about an electrical claim on Dock C. His expression shifted for less than a second. "That must be the vendor issue. You never told me about a fire." "It wasn't really a fire. More like heat damage. The contractor probably selected the wrong category." "And my signature?" He sighed. "Mom, you authorized me to handle insurance paperwork while you recovered. I probably approved it through the portal. Let me straighten it out." He reached for the mouse. I moved it away. "I'll handle it," I said. His concerned expression returned. "Your renewal is 6 weeks away. If they think there's a maintenance problem, they could raise the premium or drop the Marina." He had named the danger before I mentioned the renewal. "Send me the contractor's information." "Sure." He left for the repair yard. I watched until he disappeared behind the storage building. Then I opened the notebook. Date, time, claim number, statements made, evidence observed. I did not write that my son had lied. Not yet. I wrote only what I could prove. That afternoon, I enlarged the claim photographs. In the third image, polished metal beside the supposedly burned cabinet reflected the person holding the camera. But the right hand was clear. On the ring finger was a silver class ring with a blue stone and a chip along one edge. I had paid for that ring when Eric graduated from college. I kept the photograph open until the Marina office went dark around me. The ring did not prove Eric had filed the claim. It proved he had been beside the cabinet while somebody photographed damage that had not occurred. That was enough to stop treating the paperwork as a mistake. The next morning, I called Naomi Brooks before her shift. Naomi had apprenticed under me. She was better with electrical systems than most inspectors twice her age. And she had learned when not to ask questions over the phone. "I need a safety review," I told her. Quietly. "How quiet?" "Eric cannot know it is different from routine maintenance." She paused. "When?" "Before lunch." Naomi began with Dock C. She removed the replacement cabinet's cover, studied the wiring, then scraped one inspection sticker with a screwdriver. The blue surface peeled away in a single strip. A real municipal sticker separates in layers, she said. This was printed on office stock. The number beneath it belonged to a pump inspection 4 years earlier at a warehouse across town. By noon, she had found 3 more copied serial numbers. 2 panels had fresh maintenance labels placed over older ones. A fuel pump controller had been billed as replaced even though its factory date showed it had been installed years before the invoice. I asked who had submitted the work orders. Naomi looked toward the office. Eric was inside on his phone. Accounting sent them to me. She said, I assumed you approved them. I did not mention the rain. That afternoon, I pulled archived photographs from our storage server. My husband had insisted we photograph every dock at the start and end of each season. Those images gave me dates, equipment conditions, and serial plates no one could rewrite. One photograph showed the Dock C cabinet working normally 2 days after the insurance report claimed it had burned. Another showed a support beam listed as structurally unstable holding a service crane without visible damage. The invoices came from companies I did not recognize. None appeared in the state contractor database. No accident. That was when I called Denise Klein. Denise handled title work for commercial properties and had closed 2 Marina loans for us. I brought her the limited power of attorney I signed after surgery. She read it twice. He could communicate with insurers and pay routine vendors, she said. He could not create new debt, approve major repairs, or sign claims as though he were you. Then the claim is invalid. Maybe, but outside institutions may still see him as authorized until you formally revoke this. If we move too fast, he may learn you are investigating. I asked her to prepare the revocation without recording it yet. Her eyes narrowed. Are you trying to catch your own son? I am trying to understand what he has done. There was a difference, although it was shrinking. That night, I created a duplicate financial archive and changed the permissions on invoices. Eric could still view the account, but vendor documents were copied to a secure folder he could not see. I routed approvals through a second email address and left the old system active. If someone was building a lie with Marina paperwork, I wanted it to keep moving. Beneath the office photographs, I found one of Eric, asleep on a folded tarp while his father and I repaired storm damage. He had spent weekends carrying tools, cleaning pumps, and waiting for us to finish jobs we always called emergencies. We paid for his school. We gave him work. I remembered every sacrifice we made for him. I could not remember asking whether he wanted any of it. The next morning, Eric found Naomi checking the fuel dock controls. What are you looking for? He asked. Renewal inspection, I said before she could answer. His gaze moved from Naomi to me. Do you suspect something? It was the first time I had lied directly to my son. No, I am making sure the insurer cannot surprise us. He relaxed, but only slightly. Then he placed a glossy packet on my desk. It showed glass condominiums rising where our repair yard stood. One serious accident could bankrupt this place, he said. The developer is still interested. You should hear them out. I closed the packet, set a meeting. His smile came too quickly. After he left, the secure inbox chimed. An account inactive for nearly 3 years had submitted a new invoice for emergency structural stabilization. The amount due was $186,000. Payment was required 3 days before the developer's proposed purchase meeting. I did not pay the $186,000 invoice. I printed it, sealed a copy in my evidence file, and called Howard Bell at the credit union. Howard knew urgency was often part of the trap. We met after closing. I brought the invoice, vendor list, insurance file, and payment history. If these companies are real, we verify them, Howard said. If they are not, we follow the accounts. The first vendor used a rented mailbox. The second used a phone service that forwarded calls through 3 numbers. The third claimed to perform marine structural work, but its registration belonged to a company dissolved 18 months earlier. All 3 payment accounts led to the same regional bank. Howard could not reveal the account holders without a formal review, but he found a connection in our records. Each vendor had previously received money from Northline Build Group, Eric's company. He had started Northline 5 years earlier with a partner named Calvin Reed. They renovated restaurants and apartments until a downtown project collapsed under cost overruns and a lawsuit. Eric told me he had walked away clean. Public filings showed otherwise. Eric had personally guaranteed part of Northline's debt. When Calvin left, the guarantees stayed behind. My son had been carrying obligations he never mentioned. The invoices were coordinated. They were pieces of a structure. Eric approved work that never happened. The Marina did not pay. The invoices became delinquent. Those balances were gathered into a private debt package controlled through a company registered to Calvin. Combined with safety violations and insurance trouble, the Marina could be presented as a failing property whose owner had little choice but to sell. Howard arranged the documents across the table. "None of this creates a valid foreclosure by itself," he said. "But it can frighten an owner, weaken financing, and make a distressed sale look reasonable." The packet made sense. The broker was Tessa Wynn. Planning records showed she had already presented a waterfront proposal to a luxury developer. Their rendering erased our repair yard, fuel dock, and storage buildings. In their place stood condominium towers and a private promenade. A note described the Marina as financially unstable, environmentally exposed, and burdened by structural claims. They had priced the property before telling me it was in danger. The next morning, I watched mechanics and boat owners working around the docks, unaware someone had reduced their livelihoods to a demolition schedule. Denise warned me not to touch the large invoice. If you pay it, they may claim you accepted the work and recognized the vendor. Howard needed a transaction he could trace. We selected a smaller invoice for $2,840, supposedly for emergency pump calibration. Naomi documented that no calibration had occurred. Denise prepared a memorandum explaining the payment was part of a good faith fraud review. I authorized it. Sending money toward a lie felt too much like helping it become real. Howard monitored the transfer. Within an hour, the money moved through the vendor account and into Northline's old operating network. At 4:36, security footage showed Eric entering the office. At 4:41, the transfer was viewed through his login. At 4:44, he called me. "Mom, I saw the stabilization invoice. We cannot absorb expenses like this forever. I know. This is why you should consider the offer." I let the silence stretch. "Maybe I am tired of carrying all of it," I said. "Set the meeting. I will listen." His voice softened. "That is all I have been asking." Denise reminded me that every message now carried risk. I had not approved a sale, but Eric would hear surrender in anything close to it. The insurer still had not decided whether to renew our policy. If coverage was suspended before we proved the claim false, the lender could demand replacement insurance or classify us as a higher-risk borrower. Eric did not need a court order to hurt the Marina. He needed several institutions to become nervous at once. 2 days later, Howard called me back. Someone using my limited authority had requested the Marina's full loan payoff statement, including the amount required to clear the lender's interest at closing. I had never requested it. The request had been sent 14 days after the false fire claim. Attached was a title company reference number and a proposed transaction date. Eric had not merely arranged a developer meeting. He had scheduled a closing for 10 weeks after the fire that never happened. The closing date told me Eric was no longer testing the edges of my authority. He was using it as if the Marina already belonged to him. Denise wanted the revocation filed immediately. Howard wanted another day to preserve the account trails. I wanted to understand why my son believed he had the right to take what I had never offered him. That question sent me back to the locked records cabinet. My husband, Paul, had kept everything: tax maps, permits, loan releases, even notes from contractors who had been dead for years. Behind the Marina's original purchase agreement, I found a thin envelope with Eric's name across the front. Inside was a letter in Paul's handwriting, dated 11 weeks before he died. He wrote that Eric would someday take control of the Marina if he proved he could protect the people who worked there and keep the shoreline open. He called ownership a responsibility that had to be earned. The letter had never been mailed. Paul had never discussed that promise with me. There was no signed transfer, no amendment to our estate plan, and nothing that created a legal right. But the words were real. I read the letter once more. A photocopy line ran faintly along one edge. Eric had seen it. I remembered him asleep beneath a workbench while Paul and I repaired storm damage. I remembered the bills we paid and the jobs we found after his plans failed. What I could not remember was asking whether he wanted the life we had prepared for him. The next afternoon, Eric entered the office carrying revised numbers for the developer. He noticed the open cabinet. Looking for something? Old title records. He placed the folder on my desk but kept one hand on it. Dad cared about what happened to this place. So do I. That is not the same thing. His voice stayed controlled, but the anger beneath it was old. What do you think your father wanted? I asked. Eric's grip tightened. I think you already know. He left before I could answer. It did not excuse the fraud, but it changed the shape of the betrayal. Eric was not only escaping debt. He had convinced himself I was withholding something his father had promised him. Before I could decide what to do with that truth, Naomi called from the fuel dock. Come alone. She had removed the cover from the leak detection panel. One sensor wire had been disconnected and tucked behind the housing, making the system look intact. When was the last test? Yesterday. The log says it passed. The initials beside the entry were Eric's. Naomi ran a sealed test with dyed water. The alarm stayed silent while a thin rainbow sheen spread across the surface. If this had been fuel, she said, we could have lost containment before anyone noticed. Reconnected. I already replaced the lead and tested the backup. Document everything. She stared at me. Then remove him today. I cannot. Not yet. This is not bookkeeping anymore. I know. Do you? Patience around paperwork is one thing. Patience around a disabled safety system is pride wearing a respectable coat. I shut down the fuel dock until Naomi cleared every alarm, then sent the records to Denise and Howard. No unsafe system remained active, but I still delayed confronting Eric. I needed his communications preserved, the false vendors tied together, and each institution notified in the right order. If I moved too soon, he could destroy records, blame contractors, or claim he acted under authority I had left in place. That night, I put Paul's letter beside the photograph of Eric's ring. One showed the son my husband believed he could become. The other showed the man standing beside fabricated damage. I had spent years assuming control was the same as protection. Eric had spent years assuming inheritance was the same as ownership. We had both used the Marina to avoid saying what we wanted from each other. My plan changed before midnight. I was no longer going to save the business merely by defeating my son. I would remove his access, dismantle the debt scheme, and create a future for the Marina that neither of us could control alone. The phone rang the next morning. A woman introduced herself as Tessa Wynn. She said the title company had reserved the closing room and Eric wanted to make sure I felt welcomed. Then she lowered her voice as if offering me a kindness. Once this is finished, Marlene, you can finally retire without carrying the harbor on your back anymore. Tessa's promise told me what she believed. Retirement was the weakness they could sell back to me. I thanked her and called Denise. By noon, Eric's authority was formally revoked. Denise recorded it with the county, insurer, lender, and title company. Howard flagged the false vendors and prepared the credit union's recovery action. The $2,840 payment remained inside the monitored trail. The larger invoices were marked disputed, while the shell company still believed it controlled enough debt to force me toward the closing. For the first time, I was not just collecting evidence. I was building a future Eric could not seize. Every document now had to protect the Marina without revealing the people working to save it in secret. Naomi called a meeting in the repair bay after the evening shift. What happens here when you are gone? She asked. I have been working on that. No, you have been deciding it. She was right. I had planned to protect their jobs without trusting them with the plan. You keep choosing what is best for everyone, Naomi said. Eric is wrong, but he learned that habit somewhere. So I apologized for treating loyal people like equipment instead of adults who could help own the future. Denise explained the employee cooperative. The workers and tenants could form an operating company, qualify for a community development loan, and purchase the marina business under a conditional agreement. They would receive the docks, repair operation, leases, and equipment, not unrestricted development rights. Naomi signed last. We are not your people anymore, she said. We are your partners. The financing was not guaranteed. The lender wanted audited numbers, environmental reviews, and proof the disputed debts would not attach to the new operation. Howard believed it could work if the fraud case held. That left the land. Through Denise, I met with a conservation attorney and a public access trust. We drafted an easement protecting the working shoreline, pedestrian access, and space for a marine repair school. It blocked private residential development across the marina footprint. The towers in Tessa's rendering became nearly impossible. An independent attorney reviewed the easement. A physician confirmed my capacity. Then I signed, and Denise recorded it. If Eric ordered a fresh title search, he would see it. Tessa was pressuring the title company to rely on an older report and close quickly. Denise could not conceal a recorded interest or mislead anyone. Our advantage was timing. The updated search would be delivered at closing unless Eric requested it early. Dock A supported seasonal boats and 2 charter captains. Dock B kept 3 mechanics working through winter. Dock C powered the repair slips and fuel controls. I recorded names, jobs, years of service, and the families depending on each paycheck. Eric had reduced the Marina to acreage and resale value. I wanted a record of the lives inside it. Then I sent him operating statements, unresolved insurance correspondence, the payoff figure, and a schedule of legitimate repairs. None was false, and none promised a sale. I withheld the revocation, lender review, cooperative financing, and easement because he had no right to my legal strategy. Eric called 20 minutes later. "You finally understand," he said. "I understand I cannot keep doing everything myself." His voice warned, "You will not regret this." The next morning, he arrived with a scale model of the development. White towers rose above a miniature harbor. He pointed to the repair yard and explained where restaurants, parking, and a private promenade would stand. He spoke as though the people working outside had already disappeared. He mistook my silence for surrender. I agreed to attend the closing on one condition. The developer's principal, title officer, lender, my attorney, and a harbor board representative all had to be present. Eric hesitated. Why the harbor board? Any transfer affects permits and public access. He wanted the closing badly enough to agree. It was scheduled for Friday at 10. On Thursday evening, the cooperative signed its conditional purchase agreement. It transferred the Marina operation only after the disputed debts were resolved and financing closed. I retained the land until every legal condition was satisfied. At 6:15 Friday morning, Howard called. "Tessa has hired counsel. She contacted the investigators last night." I looked toward the office where Eric's model sat under plastic. What did she offer? Emails, draft invoices, text messages, and testimony. She wants distance from the vendor fraud before the lender freezes anything connected to her. Tessa had not waited for Eric to lose. She had started saving herself. By 9:45, rain had turned the title company's windows gray. Eric arrived with 2 binders and the confidence of a man who believed the difficult part was finished. Calvin Reed represented the shell company. Naomi, Denise, Howard, the title officer, and a harbor board representative completed the table. The title officer reviewed the proposed debt purchase and immediate assignment to the developer. Eric described the marina as distressed, unsafe, and unable to survive without outside investment. Then the updated title report appeared on the screen. The conservation and public access easement filled 3 pages. The developer leaned forward. "What is that?" Denise answered. "A recorded restriction protecting the working shoreline, public access, and marine training use. Residential development is prohibited." Eric stared at me. "You signed this?" "I did." "There was no signed sale agreement," Denise said. Marlene remained free to protect her property. The door opened. Tessa entered with an attorney and sat at the far end of the table. Her attorney placed a folder before the title officer. "Ms. Wynne will not proceed with the development assignment." She preserved communications concerning the invoices and insurance claim. Eric's face tightened. "Tessa, what are you doing?" "Protecting myself." He turned to the developer. "We still control the vendor debt." "That debt is disputed," Denise said. She presented the recorded revocation of Eric's authority. The original document allowed payroll, routine vendors, and insurance communication. It did not authorize new debt, property transfers, false repair claims, or use of my signature. Howard opened his file. The credit union traced vendor payments into accounts connected to Northline's former network. Related funds are frozen, and the records have been referred to counsel and investigators. Calvin stood. "I was told these were legitimate receivables." Eric ordered him to sit. Calvin did not. Without development rights, the property was worth far less. Without uncontested debt, Eric could not force a distressed sale. "This transaction is suspended," the title officer said. "No funds will move and nothing will record until these issues are resolved." Tessa avoided Eric's eyes. Calvin moved toward the door. The white condominium towers were returned to their foam case. Naomi watched them box up the future that had erased her job. She did not smile. I slid the cooperative agreement across the table. The Marina operation has a different buyer. Eric stopped at Naomi's name. The employees, the mechanics, dock hands, and long-term tenants formed a cooperative. Their financing is conditional, but they hold the future purchase rights once the disputed obligations are cleared. You are giving strangers what Dad promised me. They are not strangers. Eric produced a photocopy of Paul's letter. This says the Marina would be mine. It says you could earn control by protecting the workers and keeping the waterfront open. Denise said, the letter is not a deed, contract, will, or ownership transfer. Marlene also completed independent capacity reviews. Eric turned to me. You planned this while pretending to consider my offer. I reviewed what you gave me. I never promised a sale. You wanted to humiliate me. I wanted the Marina protected before you knew I had found the false claim. His voice dropped. You never trusted me. Part of that accusation was true. I trusted you with authority I failed to supervise. Before that, I treated you like the unreliable boy you had once been. Even after you became a man, I can admit both mistakes. Then admit you stole my inheritance. Your father gave you a hope, not ownership. I should have asked what you wanted instead of deciding your future. None of that authorized false debt, a disabled leak sensor, manufactured hazards, or use of my identity. His control broke. I wanted you to feel what it was like. What was what like? Being trapped inside something somebody else controlled. Working every weekend because you and Dad called it family. Waiting while you decided whether I was responsible enough for what I had already paid for. For the first time, Eric was not selling me anything. I believed his pain. I did not confuse it with innocence. The cooperative receives the future purchase rights, I said. You receive no controlling interest and no development profit. Any settlement begins with repayment, surrender of the disputed claims, and cooperation with the lender. The developer left. Calvin followed. The title officer collected the unsigned documents. Naomi accepted the cooperative file while the model disappeared into its case. Eric remained seated. After the others entered the hallway, he asked me to stay. His anger was gone. Is there a settlement that keeps this from becoming public? That depends on what you mean. He looked at the closed door. I mean my daughter. Can we keep her from finding out what I did? I looked at him for a long time. No, I said. I will not build another lie to protect you from the first one. Eric lowered his eyes. Any settlement would require honesty with his family. Denise put that condition in writing beside repayment, cooperation, and surrender of every claim against the Marina. 3 weeks passed. Eric agreed to return the money moved through the false vendors, abandon the $186,000 stabilization demand, and transfer Northline's remaining equipment toward restitution. Calvin surrendered the shell company's debt package and opened its records to the lender. The credit union kept its recovery action open. Eric's professional license was suspended while the state reviewed the false invoices and safety records. Prosecutors received the file, but Denise warned me not to predict an arrest or prison. Tessa provided emails showing the Marina had been marketed as distressed before the claim was filed. Her cooperation reduced her civil exposure, but the developer cut ties with her, and her brokerage dismissed her. She avoided the worst, not the cost. The cooperative's financing took longer. The lender demanded clean title, corrected inspections, environmental testing, and proof no fabricated vendor could attach a lien. Naomi spent evenings helping mechanics understand loan and voting rules. 6 months after the failed closing, the funds cleared. The cooperative purchased the operation, equipment, and leases. I retained a limited life interest in a small apartment above the office and a consulting position with no unilateral control. Naomi became general manager. Her first policy required 2 approvals for every payment above $5,000. Inspections went to an outside firm. Vendor changes required a board vote. No family member could control the books alone. My name came off the private owner's door. In its place, Naomi mounted the cooperative charter. The conservation easement brought changes I had once resisted. A pedestrian path opened along the water. The unused storage building became a marine repair classroom. Apprentices learned electrical safety beside the replacement cabinet on Dock C. Naomi kept the scorched wire photograph in the training file as proof that paperwork could endanger people as surely as a loose cable. I began counseling. At first, I treated each session like an interview. I supplied facts, dates, and explanations. The counselor asked why I could describe every Marina emergency but almost nothing Eric had feared as a child. I said fear was not useful during an investigation. Maybe that is why he stopped bringing his to you, she replied. I did not accept responsibility for his crimes. I did accept that competence had become my favorite hiding place. I had given Eric food, tuition, work, and solutions. I had rarely offered him the chance to fail without judgment or speak without correction. Understanding that did not earn him his job back. It did not restore his authority or cancel restitution when I felt lonely. For months, we communicated only through attorneys. Then one evening, I found a voicemail from him. Mom, I told Claire. I told her all of it. She asked whether I was sorry because I got caught or because I did it. I did not know how to answer. I am trying to. I left the message unheard for 2 days. On the third night, I played it and called. Eric answered on the first ring but said nothing. You do not bargain your way back into trust, I told him. You tell the truth when it costs you something. Then you keep telling it. I know now. No, you are beginning to know. The call lasted 4 minutes. I did not invite him home. He did not ask for the Marina. Before we hung up, he said he would call again after his next meeting with the lender. I said I would decide whether to answer. That was not forgiveness. It was the first conversation we had ever had without a property standing between us. 8 months after the closing failed, I walked the docks at sunset. Visitors moved along the new path while apprentices locked the classroom. The mechanics finished a repair on Dock B, and Naomi checked the final payment from an office that no longer belonged to me. One by one, the harbor lights came on. They were powered by systems Eric could not secretly alter. Paid through accounts I could not control alone, and protected by people whose futures no longer depended on my family's promises. I had spent most of my life believing a legacy survived because one person held it tightly enough. Watching those lights reflect across the water, I finally understood that saving it had required me to give up the right to possess it.